Thank you. Thank you so much for making time to join this side event organized by an alliance of actors, including the GPDC, the government of Sweden, and the permanent missions of Mexico, Zambia, Korea, Ireland, as well as the United Nations, World Institute for Development Economics and Research. This side event will look into the effectiveness agenda according to the title, where evidence meets in actions, country dialogues leading collective accountability on development cooperation. And through the speakers and the respondents, we're going to explore the dynamic between monitoring exercise, discussing findings at country level, and generating change. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the governments of Mexico, Zambia, Republic of Korea, and Ireland, the permanent missions to New York, for setting up this group of friends for effective development cooperation, which is a great effort that we really support and appreciate, very timely given the importance of the effectiveness agenda in these very complicated times. I will not waste much time, and just noting that from the Seville conference, the Compromiso de Sevilla, there are strong messages about the importance of the effectiveness agenda. And I would say that even the latest evidence about ODA trends, even these round of findings are demonstrating the importance of using the resources that we have in the best way possible, in the most effective way. And you may know about the GPDC. The GPDC is the Global Partnership for Development Effectiveness Cooperation, and we play a quite unique role when it comes to monitoring the effectiveness principles. And pretty soon we're going to publish the next comprehensive report on the implementation of the effectiveness agenda. And this is the role, one of the roles that we play, providing evidence to make sure that discussion on effectiveness is grounded into evidence. And this is becoming even more important. The report will be launched in the United Nations setting in September. We have some early findings that have been captured in the interagency task force report, and these early findings actually speak to some challenges that are very telling, for instance, about the use of country results frameworks by donors using indicators coming from the statistical systems of countries. And so much more will be available when the report is going to be published, but we could have a very productive discussion starting with some reflections on important effectiveness. Let me just conclude by echoing many of the messages we heard, for instance, this morning, that data is not just important for itself. Data is important as much as or as far as it generates change, and this is one of those reflections that we should develop today. Some house rules. The event is being live streamed on the UN Web TV, and you may have understood that interpretation is not provided inside events. Some distinguished speakers will speak in French and Spanish, and we're going to put on the screen codes so you can go directly to the English language translation of these inputs in French and in Spanish. House of rules, these were House of rules, and so we can move hopefully to the next step. Before going into the panel discussion, we're going to have a video coming from the Republic Democratic of Congo, and more specifically from His Excellency Ms. Guilherme Bembiza. Let me see if this is working. Yes. We have an issue with audio system. 1 sec. We move to the next. All right, so IT is not working today. All right, let's take advantage of this and let's move into the panel discussion. We have three distinguished panelists providing different perspectives, starting to my let me see one thing, because I'm noting down that we may have opening remarks from Zambia. Sorry. The sequence of inputs due to this technical hiccups is changing a little bit. I'm very pleased to introduce Ms. Kahoma, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Finance and National Planning in Zambia. Thank you so much for joining this conversation. You have the floor.
Chairperson of this session, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege to open this timely discussion on how we move from evidence to action in advancing more effective development cooperation. As we convene in the implementation of the severe commitment, we are reminded that our collective ambition to accelerate progress on the Sustainable Development Goals will be judged not by the strength of our commitments alone, but by our ability to translate them into tangible results at national level. Today's dialogue comes at a critical moment. Development cooperation is becoming more complex, characterized by shrinking resources, a growing number of actors, and persistent fragmentation. Yet, we also have at our disposal robust country-owned evidence through platforms such as the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation that can guide smarter, more inclusive, and more accountable action. The real question before us is not whether we have enough data, but whether we are using it effectively to drive reform, strengthen national systems, and build trust among all stakeholders. Zambia strongly believes that inclusive country-led dialogue is central to this effort. By bringing together governments, development partners, civil society, and the private sector, we can move beyond diagnosis to collective solutions, ensuring that development cooperation is aligned with national priorities, responsive to local realities, and ultimately delivers impact for our people. In our national capacities, we have embraced platforms to engage as government with development partners, the private sector, and civil society organizations around the respective contributions towards realization of our national development agenda. Effectiveness of development cooperation efforts remains a key area of focus, and we align to the principles of development cooperation effectiveness. As a co-chair of the Group of Friends of International Development Cooperation Effectiveness with Mexico, Ireland, and the Republic of Korea, we are keen to provide space to strengthen coherence, dialogue, and effectiveness across the international development cooperation system. We would like to contribute to sustaining momentum from severe commitment, particularly its renewed emphasis on development effectiveness. We are eager to support the implementation and follow-up of commitments on international development cooperation, including through the Severe Platform for Action. Participating in these events, such as this one that we have this afternoon, is a key part of it. It is for this reason that Zambia is delighted to co-host this side event and looks forward to a fruitful discussion. We hope we will use this opportunity to share lessons, challenge assumptions, and reaffirm our shared responsibility to turn commitments into measurable results. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Permanent Secretary, and thank you again, Zambia, for taking the lead together with other countries in creating this group of friends here at the United Nations. Your points are well noted. Diagnosis is good, but not enough, and we need to move from data that is available, diagnostics that is available, to real action. Thank you so much. And really now it's time to hear from the distinguished panelists. I'll be introducing them very quickly right now, and then we're going to move to the questions. We're going to have three sets of questions. The first one is going to be around results monitoring. The second round of question will be about dialogue. And the third round of question is going to be the next steps, what comes next. So we're going to have these 3 steps that we're going to go through together and the panelists here. We're going to hear from Burkina Faso, Dr. Lamba Hissa Kobiaganda. Sorry for mistreating your name. Ms. Elea Welmelinga, Deputy Head, Department of International Development, Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs, France. And Ms. Sarah Torres, Coordinator, Reality of Aid Network, Asia Pacific. So we move step by step to the first question. And I would like to address the first question to our distinguished speaker from Burkina Faso. And specifically, it's notable that Burkina Faso has been so involved in the monitoring exercise. You had your action dialogue. So I would say the first question really goes straight to that point. What have you learned from these action dialogue? To which extent the data that you have gathered through the GPDC is now something that you're using to your benefit? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Je vais m'exprimer en français. Merci donc, monsieur le modérateur. Le Burkina Faso est heureux de prendre part donc à ce panel. Et bien évidemment, le Burkina Faso fait partie des États qui adhèrent donc au 4e cycle mondial de l'exercice du partenariat mondial pour une coopération efficace au service donc du développement. Alors, revenant essentiellement à la question qui m'a été donc posée, je voudrais dire donc que l'efficacité de la coopération au service du développement demeure globalement élevée au Burkina Faso, même si elle a une tendance relativement baissière depuis 2018. Alors, 2 principaux enseignements que nous pouvons effectivement donc tirer de l'analyse donc des faits, c'est qu'en matière de dialogue inclusif, de planification et de contrôle parlementaire, le Burkina Faso a pu consolider suffisamment d'acquis qui traduit effectivement un effort d'impulsion et d'implication donc des acteurs dans l'élaboration des stratégies nationales et dans l'exercice de la redevabilité donc conjointe. Deuxième élément qui est effectivement considéré comme une problématique sur laquelle nous travaillons, l'utilisation des systèmes nationaux, la prévisibilité de la coopération et la disponibilité des données statistiques, ainsi que la mobilisation complète des partenaires demeurent fragiles. Et dans ce contexte, et tenant compte bien sûr de l'engagement donc des CEVI, nous sommes particulièrement très instruits à travers donc les recommandations qui ont été faites. Donc nous pensons que dans cet environnement international marqué bien sûr donc par la baisse drastique donc de l'aide publique au développement, la fragmentation des interventions et bien sûr donc la montée des vulnérabilités, la réponse la plus solide reste le renforcement du leadership national, l'alignement sur les priorités des pays et bien sûr la transparence budgétaire, ce qui nous permettra de garantir la qualité des données et la confiance dans les systèmes donc nationaux. Et c'est d'ailleurs ça qui est un peu l'esprit donc de CEVI, qui réaffirme que chaque pays est responsable au premier chef de son développement et que l'appui international doit s'appuyer sur les stratégies nationales et que les données de qualité sont indispensables à la prise de décision et de suivi. Nous estimons également que le Burkina Faso, à travers bien sûr donc l'évaluation réussie du PFA réalisée en 2025, couronné bien sûr par l'obtention du PFA tchèque, devrait donc davantage contribuer à relever la dimension de l'État et à l'utilisation bien sûr des systèmes nationaux. Et c'est un processus sur lequel nous travaillons significativement et nous croyons pouvoir effectivement faire de cette coopération un élément efficace pour améliorer la situation donc de nos concitoyens. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. And let me emphasize the importance of holding these action dialogues in countries. So the examples of Burkina Faso is very, very telling. Your reference to, I know that few things now, an inclusive dialogue, national strategies, use of national systems, in this context of sharp decline in ODA, and also you refer to fragmentation. So thank you so much. The case of Burkina Faso will be properly reported in the GPDC monitoring report. And on the GPDC website, you will find the early findings pertaining to the different countries. So if you go up on the web to the GPD website, you're going to find all these elements. I think I can fill a gap. I can introduce myself. I am one of the GPDC co-chairs, which is one of the reasons why I am so well into the GPDC workings and also familiar with the website. Thank you so much. And now we can move to the question that is addressed to our colleague from France, and is really about a reflection that you may want to share about the current trends and volumes and the relationship with quality and the role you see for platforms such as GPDC or the effectiveness agenda in the current context where the volumes are going down.
Tout d'abord, merci beaucoup pour l'invitation à ce panel. Et en l'absence de traduction formelle, je m'exprimerai finalement en anglais. The latest ODA figures show that in the context of tightening resources, we must focus all the more on maximizing the impact of our efforts in order to maintain a high level of ambition. The needs on the ground remain massive, with a gap of $4 trillion for the SDGs, which unfortunately cannot be fully met by ODA alone. With the concessional resources at our disposal, we must concentrate our efforts, our funding, where the needs are and where the needs are most urgent. Consequently, where it will be the most effective, that is clearly a catalytic role of ODA, a concessional euro spent in a least development country or a small island development states does not have the same impact as in an emerging country. Effectiveness is all the more important given that recent attacks on development policies as well as budget cuts among the largest donors. That's why we need to do more to demonstrate to our fellow citizens on the usefulness of these policies as well as their benefits. We therefore owe this accountability, and we talked about this accountability into your introduction, for effectiveness both to our fellow citizens and to our partners to maintain solidarity as a top priority of the international agenda. In this regard, we have been committed to establish this approach to mutual accountability for several years now. This is already the case with our Development National Agency, which works closely with the institutions in place in partner countries, but also within the framework we have established around country strategies. I want here to highlight that the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation monitoring exercises are very useful in that sense for our teams on the ground, especially for our local development agency, to get a sense of the proper impact of our development project. At the international level, France is actively advocating in all fora for more coordination, more impact, and more effectiveness. Effectiveness is one of the 4 key principles that we are working on during our French G7 presidency. The aim is to achieve a new consensual approach based on mutual beneficial partnerships. This does include fighting fragmentation, but also coordination, building the capacity of vertical funds and multilateral development banks to work in systems together, promoting the country platform approach and accountability mechanism. It will be at the core of the G7 Development Ministerial meeting next week.
Great conclusion, because this reference to the G7 process is very interesting and can help actually us frame this discussion within the larger picture of the discussions taking place on the global level. I know that different suggestions coming from you, and really appreciated that you're differentiating coordination, impact, and effectiveness as three dimensions that are interconnected, but these dimensions do have their own specific features. So thank you so much. So this is the first round of questions around the results, the monitoring exercise, and how to use the findings from the monitoring exercise. Now we move to the second set of questions, which are really more specific about the dialogue in countries. We have already heard a few comments in this regard from Burkina Faso specifically, but now I would like to start with the CSO representative, Ms. Sarah Torres, from Reality of Aid Network Asia Pacific, and it would be great to hear from you the CSO perspective on these action dialogues, whether or not CSOs do see added value in these action dialogues, and whether or not you have already good lessons, some lessons that you can share with us from these exercise, with the understanding that the full set of findings will be available later this year. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Luca. Good afternoon, everyone. So because my regional scope is Asia and the Pacific, the examples I'd be sharing are from the region. So I'll try to condense them, because as Luca said, this will be available soon. Some are actually available already, because some finished early. Anyway, so civil society are, of course, development actors in their own right. Therefore, our presence in any multi-stakeholder dialogue shouldn't just be an afterthought, but it is supposed to be regarded as an expectation, because of the expertise and experience we have working at different levels and scope and with different mandates. So we also have our own capacity to organize our own dialogues, to unite on our messages, recommendations, and advocacy strategy. So basically, because of the nature of our sector, they are necessary actors, or we are necessary actors in dialogues, planning, evaluation, and other development processes. So for the region, in my experience, we were able to tap at least 4 local partners to report on the Forum R. So we have the Philippines, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Cambodia. They've been very active in the Forum R. And along with their members and allies, these organizations participated in country dialogues and have organized their own dialogues or reporting processes. So at this level, it's good to note that the 4MR process in the 4 countries have worked, and at some level took into account civil society analysis on EDC progress and their asks moving forward. The challenge, however, is to what extent? That is always the question. When across the countries, one thing is the same, and I'm sure you can already predict what I'm going to say, the headline challenge is really shrinking civic space and enabling environment. So even though we say that processes are available, some governments are more inclusive than others, there's still that internal challenge among civil society, the restrictive space and enabling environment that allows them to really move forward and carry out their own actions. So basically, how can we talk of progress when the people who are supposed to, one, experience this progress and counter-check what is being said by their leaders have limited voice and space? There's still much to do in terms of these, not only in developing countries, but also our colleagues in the global north, In terms of the other EDC commitments, the 3 countries highlighted 2 major things. One, tide aid is increasing, and this affects government onus on its development strategy and control over priorities. Tide Aid also maintains dependence on donors, and we hope to move away from that, no? Because this means molding projects to fit donor interests instead of national priorities. The second main challenge is the overall transparency and accountability mechanisms and good governance of recipient countries. The accountability of donors is, of course, different from that of recipient governments. And the prevailing system that takes more from the people have led to actually massive protests last year in many parts of Southeast Asia and even South Asia. No? So engaging the forum or process is one thing, and implementing the key recommendations is another. So while I think there's progress in terms of how national governments and CSOs view 4MR, which means that there's increasing number of civil society organizations who want to know more about it and want to be engaged and want to engage, advancing EDC at country level, it's still an international endeavor. And so there should be a more legitimate, systemic, and structural reform to really push this agenda forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you so much for providing CSO lessons from some specific cases such as the Philippines, Cambodia, and Nepal. And I would say for highlighting once again one of the messages from the beginning, that sometimes we have the diagnostics, sometimes we have the space for participation, but to move to the next level, well, it takes a lot of political will and political commitment. So thank you so much. And I would like now to move to our speaker from Burkina Faso, and really if you could reflect the role that these actors have in your processes in your country.
Thank you. I will try in English because the French members speak in English. I will try. Okay. The experience of Burkina Faso show that multi-stakeholder dialogue is a central level for development effectiveness. Various reports indicate that the national monitoring process was conducted in the inclusive and participatory manners involving the public administration, civil society organization, the private sector, and traditional development partners. The participation of the private sector in the policy and strategic development process has increased as its engagement in development cooperation. Regarding civil society, there has been progress. The level considered favorable and has not yet been researched. Burkina Faso intends to create inclusive national platform with civil society and the private sector. The country is working on co-construction policies, shared accountabilities, and improving the quality of outcome. The more not state actor and inform it stricter and involve upstream, the more implementation gains in relevance, ownership, and sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you so much again for your reflections on the Burkina Faso's exercise, and very glad that you were referring to the findings from the JVDC report highlighting the good level of inclusivity and participation. And now we're moving to, if I may say, to the donor end of the spectrum. And the question, if you like, it can be really about the role that you see for donors in these actual dialogues and the incentives that we could put in place to make sure that donors' involvement is even higher and greater than what we have seen recently. Yeah. Sorry.
Thank you.
You're completely right to say that multi-stakeholders country dialogues are key to ensure concrete ways, in concrete ways, development effectiveness. That is why at national level, France has reshaped its method to engage with all stakeholders. Indeed, to explain to you a little bit how it does that work in France in terms of partnerships and dialogue with all the stakeholders. Indeed, every 2 years, we draw up a strategic document involving all the stakeholders that we call the Team France, l'équipe française, in the process, notably our development agency. We include also the private sector as well as members of civil society organizations in the local nexus. Through a detailed analysis of the realities on the ground and the partners' countries' needs, we do choose to focus on 3 of the 10 priority sectors of our policy on international partnerships. This objective is to avoid spreading our efforts too much and to concentrate our efforts and our time and our expertise on the specific areas where our partnership can be most fruitful. In that way and in this way, and even for this, there is always room for improvement, of course. I believe that we managed to meet both the objectives of effectiveness and country ownership thanks to an inclusive multi-stakeholders dialogue. Dialogue within Team France also does extend to the field of communication to present a unique message and image to our partners. We have chosen to align our communication efforts under a unique visual and a unique identity that clearly does symbolize France. This approach does respond to a practical challenge, the diversity of French actors involved, including the French Development Agency, and our network of expertise and other public institutions. This can sometimes make our action difficult to read from the outside, and that's why we think that in terms of communication, we need to work on it with our partners and to have this very clear identity when we support projects in terms of partnerships. And it's also a way, according to us, to make it like a collective effort, more visible and more intelligible, also for the citizens and for the populations. It's more than communication because, according to us, this communication does facilitate the readability of our action and our effectiveness and our impact also for both local and non-state partners.
Thank you for bringing these dimensions into the conversation, communication, and to some extent you were referring to one of the issues you already mentioned, accountability towards a multiplicity of actors, including citizens, taxpayers, and communities in the South. And this is a very full picture that describes the complexity of the job we have to take care of. And so you have this strategy documents every 2 years, bringing all actors together. Thank you so much. And you have seen the richness of the best practices and the approaches and modalities and the challenges that in the business of improving effectiveness we have to deal with. And now we move to the last set of questions, and then we move to the debate, including some distinguished respondents. And the last question is really about what comes next. I can start again from Burkina Faso, if you agree, about what happens now after the action dialogues, because it's nice to have meetings, but now it's important to move from meetings to actions. Thank you so much.
Merci beaucoup. En termes d'engagement spécifique orienté vers l'action et bien sûr les mécanismes de responsabilité collective, au Burkina Faso, pour chaque acteur, nous avons identifié donc des actions clés à réaliser. Alors, du côté du gouvernement, la priorité serait donc de renforcer encore l'appropriation nationale, l'orientation vers, bien sûr, les résultats et l'utilisation des systèmes nationaux et le mécanisme de suivi de la coopération, tel que la dernière évaluation nous a montré l'intérêt de pouvoir effectivement y avancer. Les dernières évaluations issues, bien sûr, donc, du rapport sur le partenariat, sur la coopération au service du développement, avaient identifié également que pour les autres acteurs, notamment ceux que nous appelons les partenaires techniques et financiers traditionnels, les engagements qui sont le plus attendus, c'est surtout, comme je l'ai dit dans ma première intervention, un meilleur alignement sur les priorités nationales. Et c'est également aussi une plus grande utilisation de notre système national donc, de gestion des finances publiques, et ce qui devrait nous garantir à terme d'avoir donc une meilleure prévisibilité des ressources et une communication plus renforcée sur les opportunités qui sont offertes aux organisations de la société civile et du secteur privé. Pour ce qui concerne donc le secteur privé, les recommandations portent essentiellement sur la transparence dans la gestion des ressources et bien sûr le développement donc de partenariats stratégiques. Le secteur privé, quant à lui, nous estimons que l'accent devrait être mis donc sur une participation beaucoup plus active au cadre de concertation et sur le développement de partenariats multipartites donc avec l'État, les partenaires et les autres acteurs. Essentiellement, nous pouvons dire qu'il y a 3 grands leviers sur lesquels nous comptons pour pouvoir effectivement mettre en place cette responsabilité collective. Le premier levier qui nous paraît effectivement essentiel, c'est de réactiver le mécanisme de la coordination donc de l'aide sous la forme d'une plateforme opérationnelle, réunissant bien sûr le gouvernement, les partenaires techniques et financiers, actifs, la société civile et le secteur privé, avec bien sûr des cycles de dialogue trimestriels assortis bien sûr de comptes de rendu public, ce qui est en lien avec ce que Séville proposait. Deuxième élément, c'est de produire donc une cartographie actualisée des flux d'aide et adopter un cadre de prévisibilité budgétaire, intégrant bien sûr les engagements pluriannuels des partenaires techniques et financiers, mais aussi les flux non concessionnels et les contributions des partenaires émergents, afin de rétablir une forme de transparence globale sur les ressources disponibles et surtout leur allocation sectorielle. Et enfin, renforcer le recours aux systèmes nationaux en conditionnant progressivement l'accès aux modalités d'aide aux partenaires qui respectent les procédures nationales de passation de marché et d'audit et conformément, bien sûr, donc, aux engagements de Paris et de Séville par la suite. Voilà donc quelques éléments clés que je voudrais donc dire en termes de réponse à la 3e question. Je vous remercie.
Thank you so much. All these reflections, coordination, up-to-date picture of resources available, use of national systems, and your prioritization exercise focusing around these 3 areas. So thank you so much. We move to the last speaker for this panel, the CSO delegate, Sarah Torres. In reality, I would have 2 questions. One is what CSOs are expecting now to happen in terms of commitments, and if you allow me, also what CSOs can bring to the table at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think we've ever run out of recommendations to share with our governments and international actors. And so I think the ask is still the same. And it's still very simple. It's to uphold those commitments. We've heard earlier today a lot of governments asked for donors to uphold the 0.7%, and it's still the same. of course, in all of these, we should uphold the development effectiveness principles. There's a growing call for locally led development. And what does that mean? Sometimes it depends per government, per country, what the needs are. But for civil society, when we say locally led development, there's the inclusive process, there's the community inclusion in terms of, or from assessment to planning to implementing up to evaluating. So all of these frameworks, along with, of course, international rights frameworks, have to be upheld, reviewed, revisited, and then made stronger. No. The challenge, however, is how donor and recipient countries try to shortchange their constituents by changing definitions, changing the benchmarks, the standards that could lead to misaligned policies and programs. A lot of these policies and programs try to chase profits over welfare and well-being, or they just outright disregard international norms and regulations, as what we've been seeing today. So the frameworks, the recommendations are there, but really how governments try to interpret these in a different way is one of the major challenges, if not the major one. So for us, instead of working towards sustainable development, it feels like what we have now is sustained, integrated, multiple crises. In Sevilla, civil society called for a total transformation, an overhaul of the system. And I think it's time to seriously think about how we can do this and what role the GPEDC, the DAC, and the UN and other actors should play in a transformed development cooperation architecture. Civil society, we have this, I've said we have countless of recommendations, and recently we've thought about how to localize effective development cooperation. We've come together to talk about strategies from Asia Pacific, and I have limited copies, but I'll share this with the panel. So some thinking around how we can do this at the country level. No? But another resounding ask is to transform the current state of national economies to what we call sustainable industrialization. Because really, sustainable development should be sovereign, it should be nationally determined, there should be less foreign aid, we're supposed to be loan independent, no? Or less loan dependent. Profits should go back to the people and not to private corporations. And one way is for countries to really establish their own industrial policy architecture. And it could be a multi-sectoral one where civil society are at the table or people's organizations are at the table to help figure this out. And as I've said in all of these suggestions, the EDC principles must continue to be upheld, measured, and improved. CSOs will, of course, continue doing our part. I have said about the strategies we're always coming up with these different strategies and lobbying them. But apart from that, we will continue to support in convening local actors to be more involved, promoting EDC and national development frameworks, strategies, and programming, and carrying out checks and balances. So I think the main responsibility of civil society is to really sound the alarm and push development actors, particularly governments, to do their jobs, no, that benefit everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, and for linking up our conversation with some systemic issues that we have put on the table. And this reference to industrialization is very telling in that regard. And also your reference to locally led development actually rings many bells, because this seems to be one of those agendas that are very popular at this stage within this community. So thank you so much to the panelists. We heard questions and answers. Now it's time to move to our distinguished colleagues and friends. We have Miss Grace Wood from the United Kingdom. We have Dr. Nicole Golden from the United Nations University, and we have Miss Yamiresh Woki Ayadi, our dear friend from Ayadi. I will start in order from our colleague from the UK. The floor is yours. You heard so many things. You can react to whatever you want to react to.
Thank you so much for bringing us together today. I think, as people have said, this conversation isn't new, but the Sevilla commitment has elevated the importance of development cooperation and effectiveness to a new level, and particularly at this time of more constrained resources across the board. So our test really now is how we translate this into how we better plan and finance and coordinate for greater development impact and results. So we welcome the work of the GPEDC and the new group of Friends for International Development Cooperation, and of course France through your current G7 presidency. Your focus on development effectiveness is really welcome. For the UK, we remain committed to the principles of effective development cooperation, and we've been reflecting on ourselves as a development actor, and we are shifting how we work. We're shifting our approach more towards greater and more equal partnerships, greater country leadership and localization, particularly in humanitarian assistance. And channeling more of our funding through multilaterals who have the ability to deliver results at scale, and also bringing in the fuller range of stakeholders that I think we know are already driving development progress and will be ever more important as we try to accelerate the SDGs over the next few years, including civil society, tech companies, investors, newer donors. There's a far greater ecosystem now that we need to connect with. We're also this year chairing a couple of things that are helping with this, we think. So we're chairing MOPAN, and we've also just taken on the chairship of IATI in March. And here in the UN, we're really committed to trying to support the UN80 reform effort to make the money that we put through this institution and that we're all members of way more effective and supportive of country-level impact and results. You asked what comes next, and I think for us, there needs to be a paradigm shift in power. As I said before, putting countries and communities at the heart of all of our efforts, better coordinating the fragmented ecosystem that we often have, and supporting country-level platforms. We think that could be done through more empowered resident coordinators or humanitarian coordinators. We think the UN has a role to play in helping to bring together the various actors at the country level, and reducing transaction costs for governments and national level civil society themselves. And I think we really need to land on a prioritized set of reforms across the system that we can champion and push together to create some of these behavioral changes, amongst development actors at the national level, internationally, and in country. So we're committed to that. And just a small plug, next month we are going to be hosting a global partnerships conference with South Africa, with the Children's Investment Fund Foundation, and with British International Investment in London, which is going to look to try to continue some of this conversation, bring together, as I said, that sort of broader range of actors, stakeholders that perhaps haven't been at the center of the development architecture so far, but will be as we move forward. And we're also really considering how we take this focus forward into our G20 presidency, which we'll have next year. So we'd very much welcome participation in those, feedback as well to us on what we should focus on through those moments and through those leadership opportunities. And I guess if I can ask a question as well at the end. So when I was reading about the GPDC action dialogues, it made me think of the voluntary national reviews that we have at the annual high-level political forum. I know about 30 to 40 countries are currently working on those. So a question back is how they interact and how they can inform each other. Thank you.
I guess it's me to provide some kind of feedback to this question. Let me start by saying that over time, we have been framing action dialogues more and more as an approach. And so countries are totally in the driving seat to design these moments according to their own system, which is obvious because we are aligned with country systems. So in some countries, these action dialogues have been kind of standalone exercise. In other countries, the spirit of action dialogues have been actually captured by their own systems and conversations. For a full picture, the report will present the different cases, but this is, I would say, a quick feedback response to your question. I would say that this is something similar to what we have seen in other exercises, such as the Integrated National Financing Framework. Even the INFF started with frameworks and evolved into approaches. I think this is a kind of success for the spirit of the effectiveness principles, because the effectiveness principles are very much about using country systems. So thank you so much also for raising this question. And as a GPDC co-chair, I have noted down that your support for GPDC stays strong. Thank you so much. We can move to the United Nations University system. Thank you.
Yeah? Yes. Thank you, Luca. Thank you to all the panelists. It's really a pleasure to be here. And just kind of picking up on that last question and comment, I think it's really particularly refreshing to be having a conversation in this FFD context, not necessarily about a new framework or new commitments, but how evidence is actually being used on the ground at the country level to change the way development cooperation works, hopefully. And I think it's been said, this is really a particularly important moment, being the first FfD Forum following the adoption of the Sevilla Commitment. And, and it's really important that development effectiveness as part of the FFD architecture has really been elevated in the conversation. And I think it does signal something quite important, which is that, effectiveness is no longer arguably being seen as a sidebar, but it really is central to how financing and how development in and of itself will be judged going forward. And what I heard, I think, is today is a shift from asking not whether effectiveness principles still matter. I think everyone in this room agrees that they do, but to grappling with how they operate in a world of shrinking aid budgets, as we've discussed, more constrained finance, and more fragmented and different actors, more instruments, rising inequality, and arguably just much higher stakes. So a few quick synthesis points. I think one clear takeaway for me is that monitoring really matters the most when it changes behavior. I think we've had indicators and we've had commitments for years. I think what really feels different is that the way the GPDC monitoring results are being used as a shared point of reference across government, development partners, and civil society. I think that really came through. The innovation is not necessarily in the data itself, but how it's being used politically, technically, to surface sometimes uncomfortable realities about fragmentation or predictability, the use of country systems, but then using this data to bring people together and decide what to do differently, to really reset expectations and think about how to kind of reformat, if you will, cooperation on the ground. I think what we heard from our colleagues from Burkina Faso is an example of how the monitoring doesn't just stop at the diagnosis, right? It doesn't just stop at having the data, but how that actually fed into changes, into adjustments, into planning practices, And I think using the evidence to highlight gaps around predictability and alignment kind of can help create the basis for how partners can come together to make change. And this may sound incremental or as a small change, but I think in practice it's exactly these kinds of shifts that can free up government capacity, improve delivery from all actors and from all parties. And so it matters because it's moving from inefficiency and fragmentation are not necessarily neutral, right? They disproportionately hurt those already hurted and deviate resources from where they're often needed the most. So I think that those kinds of efficiencies are really critical. Second kind of takeaway is, and our colleague from France really reiterated this as well, the role of inclusive multi-stakeholder dialogue. This panel is really honest that these dialogues are not necessarily easy, and they can be time-consuming, they can be political, we all know that. But I think that's actually, in that discomfort, arguably, is kind of where you see how much they really matter. I think it came through that inclusion is not just about optics, but it's really about who has access to the information, who is holding others to account, and what that balance of power looks like. I often say inclusion is not about attendance in the room. It really is about agenda setting, consequences when commitments aren't met, and taking that forward. And from an equitable development, that's the kind of portfolio I lead standpoint, the multi-stakeholder dialogue, it's not just procedural, it really matters and can determine what gets whose priorities get financed, and whose, kind of risks are taken into account. And I think that, what we see is that, a lot of times conversations, dialogue struggle towards co-decision, co-accountability. And I think this framework and this approach can really help bring those local actors together. And again, I just think that shift is really critical if we want to see commitments going beyond the kind of single monitoring cycle. And just a third synthesis point that I heard is, again, around this idea of collective accountability, a recurring theme that came up, and it really can't depend on goodwill or individual champions alone. In that sense, it wouldn't necessarily, I think, survive political turnover or fiscal pressure, and that really is all actors kind of coming together across the system. And I think that's, encouraging, again, from what we heard from Burkina Faso, is this idea of linking the monitoring and the dialogue outcomes to national planning cycles, to kind of policy reforms, and to budget processes, as well as to kind of coordination platforms within existing systems. I think that's embedding that within existing systems, I think is going to be really part and parcel of making sure it's not an episodic event, and something that really can make change going forward. And I think that's really critical, is as much as kind of aligning reporting, risk frameworks, and incentives going forward, as opposed to joint accountability process versus parallel ones that are kind of operating on their own tracks. So just a few quick closing kind of provocations or questions for the room and for our colleagues. And one kind of picks up on what we've heard around from our colleagues around tight aid, around locally led development, which is, are we really truly willing to kind of let the evidence rebalance power? What happens when country-owned monitoring results challenge donor preferences or delivery models? Another one is, can development effectiveness, survive, if you will, diversification? As we look at, blended finance, private sector instruments, increasing non-DAC donors is part of the framework. How do we ensure that these shared standards continue rather than get diluted? And then a third is kind of what signals seriousness now. Like we've all said this is not necessarily new. Again, not necessarily new commitments, but what practices, as the data comes forward and then we have the evidence, what practices are we willing to kind of stop if the evidence tells us that they don't work? So a few provocations for the room. Again, just really want to make clear that, these are really critical processes. We're really interested in sort of taking these principles and helping inform the dialogue and the policy going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much. the questions, your reflections. I noted that evidence can rebalance power. This is something very powerful. Thank you so much for raising that. The last discussant from Ayati, the Executive Director.
And I wanted to thank JPDC for bringing us all together in this very important moment to discuss what real actions, policy actions we can take using evidence at a country level. I think it's a very powerful tool that has come to existence over the last decade since Busan, and I really wanted to thank them for the great work that they have been doing, where over 100 countries have been actively participating in their monitoring rounds, and many countries are taking real actions in terms of policy dialogues. So for those who may not know about IATI, the International Aid Transparency Initiative, it's a multi-stakeholder initiative underpinned by an inclusive governance structure with over 75 member countries and organizations supporting it. And we are a data standard, open data standard, a strategic infrastructure for data. We've been receiving data close to $3.1 trillion spending, both ODA and non-ODA, over the last decade and a half at an activity level, making it available for many to use, including JPDC. We are truly, truly delighted that IATI and JPDC are both in the Sylvia platform for action, in the Sylvia commitment, where we both have been mentioned under the global accountability processes, where we would be contributing to coherence and fragmentation. Now, what I would like to say is the following. I think, as my colleague, Dr. Nicole has mentioned, the development effectiveness principles, no one is doubting it at the moment. We all, and the French representative also have said it, that they are very important for principles that we are all committed to, and we've been committed over a decade. Now, what is important is to try and make them a reality. How we do that is the challenge that we are facing at the moment. So I would like to say that IATI has been contributing for the principles of transparency, making data available, visible, in a timely manner for many of the partner countries, and that we've been contributing. But what we wanted to do more and more is contribute to the other three important principles of country ownership, alignment, and then result and impact. Focus on these very important principles as well. So we have been witnessing data is available, and the Zambian representative have said so as well. Data is available. Making data and good use of data is what is missing. Yes, the data is not perfect, and we are not expecting it to be perfect. We have near real-time data in IATI, and that data is useful for decision-making. And 19 countries, as we speak right now, are using IATI data, linking it to their national public finance management systems. Many are using it annually to produce their development cooperation report. This is very important because they wanted to use that data in real time for dialogue. Increasingly, what we are witnessing is that together with JPDC monitoring rounds and evidence generated with that, IATI and JPDC could actually give the best available information to many of our countries to hold these dialogues and hold them more regularly based on evidence. So that Dr. Nicole's point of intervention remains very important. Are we really willing to change behaviors going forward? We also noticed a colleague from Philippines have raised very many important points about civil society organization, participation, engagement. Very important, I would like to say, is that in IATI, although we have 2,000 publishers, we have 17,000 organizations visible in IATI. So we know who is on the ground, who is contributing on the ground, operationally active, engaging in health, education, very critical basic services that need to be provided. So why don't we use these organizations who has already existing capacities and they are implementing several ongoing projects? This way, we will reduce inefficiency. This way, we avoid administrative overburdening. Civil society organizations are actively working and reporting in IATI. IATI is the only place where civil society organizations, NGOs are reporting as well. We have a network data. We can track end-to-end. Accountability, transparency, and traceability can be a reality. So what I would like to say is that we have heard quite a whole lot here, and the dialogues are important. They are needed. Multilateralism is being weakened over the last few years. We can restore trust. We can build partnerships if we use data for partnership, if we use data for coordination, if we use data for decision making. So I call upon all who are listening to this dialogue to continue to contribute for evidence-based actions, and IATI commits to make data the most available strategic asset for everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We are coming to an end of this side event because the next official session will start soon. But before moving to the actual conclusions, I wanted to share quick reflections after this intervention, because I do believe that we have to kind of reduce fragmentations ourselves within the different platforms. This is to say that we need to join forces as much as possible in the future, because GPDC, IATI, TUSD, DUC, are providing insights in different aspects and dimensions, and they are complementing each other to a significant extent. My ideal scenario would be to create a compact of monitoring platforms that can more and more work together. And we have a significant opportunity next year with the DCF here in New York, so let's start planning for next year. Annika, it's a great pleasure for me to introduce Sweden as one of the co-chairs, but it's not just that. Sweden's record in development cooperation is amazing. You heard so many inputs and reflections. Up to you.
Thank you, Luca. And good afternoon, everybody. It's great being here, and I'm so happy that quite many people actually managed to find this room in spite of everything else happening this week. So although we are not at a moment in time where we face multiple challenges, or we are in a moment in time when we do face multiple challenges, when it comes to ensuring adequate and effective development financing, there are also a lot of positive developments. In this regard, the CV outcome document provides us with an important roadmap ahead for the coming years. For the first time, development effectiveness was elevated and reflected in the title of the International Development Cooperation section. The global commitments in the document underscore the need for more coherent, predictable, and inclusive development cooperation. Furthermore, the outcome document reaffirmed the GPDC as a relevant platform to drive effectiveness in a rapidly changing international development cooperation landscape. The GPDC monitoring is part of how we can track and deliver on the FfD commitments. It is a unique resource for all development actors. There is currently a lot of focus on evidence-based action in development cooperation. The monitoring delivers precisely that. To wrap up this side event, I would like to raise 3 issues. First, how we work together matters just as much as how much we invest. We must continue to make progress on our shared effectiveness commitments. Second, as we heard from the speakers here today, the inclusive dialogues held by partner countries as part of the GPDC's monitoring exercise are now resulting in concrete policy actions, leading to improved effectiveness of development cooperation at the country level, which is where it matters most. Third and last, I would like to flag 2 milestones taking place later this year that provide opportunities to elevate the development effectiveness agenda and promote collaboration between various actors. The first is the launch of the Global Monitoring Report from the 2023-2026 monitoring round, the first such report since 2019. The report will highlight progress and global trends in development effectiveness based on data from the 44 participating partner countries, 93 development partners, and many other development stakeholders. The second milestone is the GPDC's Global Online High-Level Dialogue. The meeting will be held in the first week of October in the margins of the 81st UN General Assembly. The event will launch the monitoring report and showcase the evidence. Also, the event aims to mobilize broad political support amongst all stakeholders for a new vision of effective development in run-up to 2030. Invites will be sent out shortly, and I welcome all to join. Thank you so much for today's session.
Thank you. I think we need to join the conversation as we need to vacate the room. Thank you so much. We can keep the conversations in the corridor if you like. You know me. You can come to me if you have questions. I've noted down the important questions that you raised. And this is just the beginning of a long-term conversations. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.